I'm super thrilled to be here and share this conversation with you. This is a conversation I have on a weekly basis with all of my clients about what it means to plan work in an increasingly agile world. You saw the agile maturity matrix there, or the measurement scale there from Steve Denning a few minutes ago. And it's interesting. I think that if as you start to move sort of towards the green side of it, the walking, the running, the flying part of it, really thinking through how you plan your work and how you react to changes in the work really defines the agility of the organization. So the conversation that I'm going to share with you today is about outcome-based roadmaps and outcome-based product planning, because roadmaps are the tool that we seem to use and have been using for many years to plan our work. And frankly, we have to really rethink that tool if we are going to try to be agile and really increase, frankly, the agility of the organization. So that's what the conversation is about today. Let's jump right into it. So let's get started. What do people love about Amazon, about Netflix, about Apple, right? What do people love about it, right? Do they love that it's well designed? Do they love that it's easy to use? Does anybody ever say, what I really love about Amazon, Netflix, or Apple is that they deliver on time? Man, those Netflix, they deliver on time. Gosh, Amazon, they delivered on budget, right? That's not the measure of success for the products and services that we love and that are defining the way that business is done today in the world. What people love about these particular products is it solves a problem for them. It meets a need for them. It makes them happy. It keeps them connected. It brings them closer to each other, right? That's what it keeps them entertained. It allows them to operate from wherever they are, right? And these benefits, right? These benefits of the products and the services that we build are the way that our consumers define success. Now, interestingly enough, this is not often how we define success as organizations, as in product and as product development teams. But we should be defining success this way with our products and services. And if we're going to measure success in terms of benefits, in terms of the things that make our customers happy, then we need to change how we plan our work, how we communicate the work that we're doing to our colleagues, our stakeholders, our bosses, and the market, and ultimately how we react to the market and how flexible that planning and communication is so that we can continue to adjust to these changing customer needs. And that's why we have to change. Now, look, there was a point in time where linear product planning makes sense, right? There is a time when this makes sense, when you're building something and you know exactly what it's supposed to look like when you're done, right? There's low risk, there's high certainty. You know exactly what the thing is supposed to look like. You know exactly what the thing is supposed to do. In that world, linear product planning makes a ton of sense because we can optimize for efficiency, we can optimize for productivity, we can optimize for consistency. And that works really well when you're building statues and towers and bridges and in repetitive manufacturing lines. And there even was a time where this made sense for software because our software was defined and it was finite and it ended. It wasn't that long ago that software came in a box where you went to the store and you bought a box of software. And in that world, right, linear product planning made sense because at some point we had to literally print that software. We had to put it in a box and ship it to the store. And in order to get there from point A to point B in these relatively low risk, high certainty world, right? We knew exactly what we were going to build. It's easier to communicate our plans using a roadmap. It's a linear fashion, and it's a great metaphor for this kind of planning, right? We start at point A, we're getting to point B, and there's some steps in between there, right? And that's the plan. The roadmap is from point A to point B and the steps in between, because there's a level of predictability there that we can say with confidence, we're going to follow these steps. It's going to cover this much distance. It's going to take this much time. And in that world, the roadmap, as we know it, makes sense. But sadly, we don't live in that world anymore. The world that we live in today is a continuous world. It's a world of continuous updates. It's a world driven by software and technology. It's a world that doesn't have an end to it. We're building continuous systems. Again, to drive this point home, think about this question. When is Amazon done? Right? When is Netflix done? When is Google, when the folks at Google wake up today, tomorrow, and they're like, you know what, that's it. That's as good as search is ever going to get. Turn off the lights, we're going home, right? We live in this continuous world, a world without an actual destination, right? And if there's no destination, if we're building these systems that we can continuously optimize, then setting a definitive plan and saying we're going from point A to point B doesn't make sense, because by the time we get to point B, a whole bunch of things have changed. You saw that in the introduction slides, right? There's too much uncertainty. And the pace of the ability to change, the ability to react, the ability to learn from the market is getting faster and faster and faster and faster. Just to put a fine point on it, when we started writing Sense and Response was the second book that I wrote with Josh Seiden. When we started writing that book in 2015, Amazon was shipping code to production every 11.6 seconds. So that means that 5 times a minute, some Amazon customer somewhere in the world was experiencing a change to the system. They were literally able to update the system 5 times a minute. Today, they do that once every second, right? So they're 5 times faster. Now, every second, some Amazon customer, 10 times faster, actually, forgive me, my math was off. Every second, some Amazon customer somewhere in the world experiences a change to the system. And in that kind of pace, maybe that might be the extreme end of things, but nevertheless, that's what's possible today. In that reality, linear product planning doesn't make sense, right? Because we simply can't plan fast enough and spell out the steps if we can deploy code every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every 2 weeks, that type of thing. So that sounds pretty daunting, right? But hang on a second, it gets a little bit worse, but actually not worse so much, but it gets even more challenging. There's a couple more things that get in the way. So we've got technology that allows us to produce artifacts and to get ideas into the hands of our customers as fast as we want. That's the bottom line. We can get things into market as fast as we want. The next thing we have to deal with is humans. Humans are particularly unpredictable and particularly complex, and they do things that surprise us. They do things that we didn't expect. They behave in ways that we didn't see coming. They are consistent and stubborn, and just because you put things in their way, they will find ways to get around those things. On top of that, they will do things with the systems and the services and the products that we build for them that we did not expect them to do. Just because we built the product to do one thing isn't going to stop a creative or persistent or stubborn human from doing something different with that product, something that we didn't predict. Behavior emerges through the use of the system. And that's something you cannot account for in a linear roadmap. People do this all the time. You've seen this with the way that Facebook has been used to manipulate opinions. You've seen this. People used to use eBay to test commerce ideas, putting up fake eBay stores to test whether or not they should sell something or not. People do that with Shopify these days. There's a million ways to use products that they were never intended to do. And so this puts us in a bit of a pickle, as they say, right? Because just because we planned something, just because we said we're going from point A to point B, and there are 7 steps between there, it's going to take us 3 months to get there, doesn't mean that that thing still makes sense by the time we get there, right? Just because we planned it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to work as we hoped, that people are going to use it in the way that we hoped. And it doesn't make sense because new behavior may have emerged in the marketplace. A new competitor may have come out. People might have started, seeing a trend somewhere else and now applying it over here, right? Could be a geopolitical shift that's happened that now makes the product less relevant. All of these things happen too quickly for our roadmaps to adjust. And so because of that, right, these rigid linear roadmaps are the enemy of agility. I know those are strong words. They're a lie, right? Because we set these expectations about dates and features and the ROI of those features by a certain date, and then we put ourselves on the hook for that. But then what if something new emerges, right? A competitive threat, new human behavior, a pandemic, right? Lots of things get in the way of these rigid linear plans. They look great, right? They instill a sense of confidence and leadership that says, yes, I know where we are and I know where we're headed. But the reality is that these things are a lie. Let me tell you a story. In October of 2008, you might remember October 2008. I do. In October of 2008, I started a new job in New York City as the director of user experience for a company called The Ladders. Now, at the time in 2008, The Ladders was a job board for people making $100,000 or more. That is what the job board was for. And at the time when I joined the company in early October of 2008, we had a balanced ecosystem of jobs and job seekers, right? Which you need in a two-sided marketplace. You need sort of the supply and the demand side. Cool. I joined the company, and 3 weeks after I joined the company, Lehman Brothers melted down, and the financial crisis of 2008 began. Literally overnight, the mix of jobs to job seekers went like this, right? Lots and lots of new job seekers on the market, literally overnight, and very, very few jobs, literally overnight. We had a 9-month roadmap planned. I was part of the team that helped create that roadmap in the time that I was with the company. What do we do, right? Do we just follow the plan, heads down, stick our heads in the sand and follow the plan, right? Or do we start to figure out what's happening and begin to react more quickly and adjust course, right? We were a 400-person company, a high-growth startup. It was relatively, although not very, but relatively easy for that organization to pivot and to adjust course and to figure out what to do next. But you multiply the size of that to a 1,000-person or a 5,000 or a 50,000 person organization, and those course adjustments become increasingly more difficult when we've committed to these linear paths, right? The challenge is with these linear roadmaps, right? The question becomes, how can we respond effectively? How can we be agile? And the reality is that we can't be agile. We can't inspect and adapt. We can't sense and respond, build, measure, learn, think, make, check, right? All of those fun circular bubble diagrams. If we use these linear rigid planning techniques, right? The world is going to throw obstacles and challenges and surprises at us, and it's going to break our plans and challenge the willpower of the organization to change course, because people commit to these. There's organizational inertia, and it takes a ton of behind these roadmaps, and it takes a ton of time to finalize them, right? We have a whole season around this, planning season, usually in large companies, towards the end of the year, every year. And so our goal is really to get away from this and to start to redefine what roadmaps should be, away from fixed dates and features and output, and towards outcomes. So let's take a look at what that looks like and what outcomes are, right? So we're talking about the outcome-based product plan, right? That is our goal. That's what we're trying to do, to redefine this thing. So step one, how do we actually start to think about product planning in a new way? The first thing that we have to do is we have to change the question that we're asking. The question that is commonly asked, the old question, and the one we must move away from, is what will we build? Right? That's because it's easy to think about features, right? They're tangible, right? Did you make the search feature? Did you make the app? Did you make the thing? Instead, I want you to think about the new question. What will people be doing differently if we succeed? That's the fundamental difference, right? That's the Apple experience. Why do people love their apples? Because it allows them to do something. What will they be doing differently if we succeed? The old question focuses on output, making a thing, right? What will we build? What is the thing that we'll make? The new question focuses on outcomes, meaningful changes in human behavior that tell us when we've achieved business success, right? What will people be doing differently if we succeed? That's the fundamental challenge in switching to a new way of product planning, is changing the question. Not what are we going to make? What behavior change are we going to elicit? Step 2 is to change how we view our work. All too often, we take an inside-out perspective, right? We believe that we're Steve Jobs, that we're going to magically deliver these beautiful products and services that people don't know that they need them, right? But in reality, we have to start looking from the outside in. We have to start to understand our customers on a regular basis. And every organization claims that they do, but I can guarantee you that very few organizations actually take the time to truly understand their customers and look from the outside and become empathetic problem solvers for their users, right? And then provide them with solutions that make them more successful, rather than saying, here's a great thing that I know you'll love because I thought of it and I think it was awesome. Instead, it's coming from the outside and saying, let me understand what challenges you're facing, and then let's figure out the best way to solve that for you. And going from that outside in perspective puts us in that customer-centric mind frame. It builds empathy for the target audience, and we start to think in outcomes. Again, we start to visualize the measure of success away from we made a thing to we changed customer behavior. Step 3 is to change the destination. This is a really tough one, right? Because again, we're committing, the roadmap metaphor says that there's a destination, there's a date and a time that we're going to get there. There's a level of effort. And I'm here to tell you that your roadmap, I love this quote from Tammy Rice, who works for Melissa Perry over at Products Lab. She said, roadmap is a marketing tool with your plans for the coming quarter and year. It's just a marketing tool. It's an advertisement of your intention to your colleagues, to your peers, to your stakeholders, to your customers. It is not a fixed date, fixed time commitment, right? It's an advertisement and it evolves, it changes. It's a living document that has to adjust with the times. Let's take a look at what one of these looks like, okay? Here's what I believe a good outcome-based product plan looks like. Let's start off with the top, okay? At the top, you have got a longer-term strategic theme. A longer term means it's a quarter, it's 2 quarters, maybe it's the strategic goal for the year, whatever it is, right? And we can have multiple of these with different teams assigned to each one of these long-term objectives, right? These are strategic objectives, that's what we're talking about. On a quarterly basis, we have our key results. Now, we're not going to do a big deep dive into objectives and key results today, but to be very, very clear, key results need to be outcomes, measures of human behavior. And we commit to those on a quarterly basis. We set our quarterly key result goals, those outcome-based goals. We then work as a team to guess, because that's what we're doing. We're guessing about what we might build to hit those KR goals, those quarterly KR goals. These are hypotheses, and we start to build a backlog of hypotheses. Now, in the near term, we can make better guesses. We have better assumptions about what we believe will help us achieve the kind of behavior change we want to see in our customers. As you look further out in time, right, there's too much uncertainty, there's too much change, there's too much unpredictability. And so the further out in time that you look, the less certain your plan is, right? Next quarter, sure, I could probably make a decent guess about 2, 3, 4 things we might try that might help us achieve the KRs. 2 quarters out, maybe there's one thing we're thinking about in 6 months. Anything beyond that is fantasy, right? The further out in time that you look, the less accurate you can predict. And so having fewer guesses commits you to fewer things that you have to change as you build new learnings. Now, we work together as a team, as an organization, for to check in on a regular basis. Now, in my diagram here, right, I've got quarterly check-ins. Why quarters? Because quarters are shorter than a year. They're shorter than 6 months. And so if quarters are too long for the industry that you're in, make that a month or 2 months. If quarters are too short because you work in an industry like pharmaceuticals, for example, or defense or whatever it is, then make them a little bit longer. But whatever it is, they need to be shorter than what you're currently doing. Checking in more frequently to determine progress. How are we trending towards our key results? And the relevance of those key results. Does it still make sense to work on this? What's changed in the world, and does it still make sense for us to work on this? Right? The idea here is that there should be no surprises at these quarterly check-ins. When you get here, this is not a conversation really about how are we doing, about are we trending okay towards our key results? What did we learn? That type of thing. It's a conversation about what are we going to do next? The responsibility, the onus is on the team doing the work, or the teams doing the work, to be radically transparent on a sprintly basis, right? At the end of every sprint, here's what we're doing, here's what we're trying, here's what we're learning, here's how we're trending towards our key results, so that when we get to that check-in meeting, we already know what's happened. We're just there to make a decision about what we're going to do next, right? Moving forward. Think about it this way, and you can watch my amazing animation as it builds here. It's like walking through a fog, right? Outcome-based product planning is like walking through a fog. Right? Do you like my fog? It's kind of nice, right? I spent a lot of time on that keynote animation. When you walk through a fog, you can see 4 or 5 steps ahead of you. You can't see 10, 15, or 20 steps ahead of you. So you're not going to go running full speed through that fog and hope that everything's going to be okay, that you're not going to hit a wall or fall off a cliff or that type of thing, right? You're going to walk 4 or 5 steps forward. Now, every time you walk 4 or 5 steps forward in a fog, you can see the next 4 or 5 steps, and you can make a decision. You're like, oh my God, there's a wall in front of me. I should turn left, or I should turn right, or I should go backwards. Right? And it's that evidence-based decision-making in short cycles that drives organizational agility, right? And that's why this type of planning helps to build agility and resilience, as the theme is, right, into your organization. Because you're not saying we're running full speed for the next 12 months in this direction. You're saying we're going to go full speed in this direction for the next 3 months. And then we're going to pause and reflect, retrospect, right, about whether or not it still makes sense to go in that direction. Okay. And so this is the goal that we're headed towards. And so let's get very tactical about this. Let's get very specific. I want to share with you an example, right? How to build one of these so that that was a bit abstract. Let's look at it a bit more specifically. And we'll talk about a few of the challenges of making this work as well before I wrap up. If you're going to build an outcome-based roadmap, you need to start with a clear business problem. What is the thing that we're trying to solve this quarter or in the next 2 quarters or this year? So I came up with an example. This is a hypothetical example, right, about an online learning service that helps lawyers maintain their credentials and keeps their skill sets current. Now, this is a business that I work for, right? So we've observed that our customers are signing up for an account, taking one of our online courses, and then not coming back, right? That's a business problem that we're trying to solve. This decreases the benefit of their continuing education. It's expensive for us because we keep having to acquire new customers rather than selling additional courses to existing ones, right? So we're going to start with a business problem. This is the problem that I want to solve. This is my business. We're going to move forward, right? We then take that problem and we turn it into a positive goal. If we solve the problem, what does that look like? What is the thing that is going to tell us that we've hit the objective, or that what is the objective that we're targeting? And in this particular case, right, if I solve that problem, I'm going to build an effective and engaging continuing education learning product for the entirety of a lawyer's career to ensure their skills are current, right? What I've done here is I've written my strategic objective, right? This is the strategic objective for my business. This is the thing that goes at the top of my outcome-based roadmap. We then ask the question that I talked about before. If we solve the problem, what will people be doing differently? Not what will we build to solve the problem, but if we solve the problem, what will people be doing differently? Well, if I solve that problem, right, where people don't take more than 1 course, at the very least, each user will take at least 3 courses each year. 25% of new customers will come from word-of-mouth referrals, and each law firm that signs up will register at least half of its staff, right? all of a sudden, these are the behavior changes, right, that I'm looking for to tell me whether or not I've actually achieved my objective, right? These are the outcomes, the behavior changes that I'm looking for. And what we've done here is we actually wrote an OKR statement, which formed the foundation for these product-based roadmaps, right? So you put all this stuff together, the objective is in yellow, the key results are in white. And again, I want to be very, very clear to call out that the key results are outcomes. They're measures of human behavior. They're meaningful measures of customer behavior. And that is the measure of success for the work that we're doing, right? So far, there's nothing in here about features, right? And so, as I mentioned before, right, the OKRs that we write, especially the key results, become our quarterly plan goals, right? That's the thing that we're working towards. And then as a team, we work together to brainstorm solution hypotheses that may achieve that objective and the desired behavior change, the outcomes or the key result, right? So for example, here's what a hypothesis, a solution hypothesis could look like, right? We believe we will increase the number of classes taken by each customer by 300%, right? So that's my outcome. That's what I'm looking for. If mid-career lawyers, that's our target audience, feel like they're progressing ahead of average rates in their career, that's the benefit that they get, right? Why do people love Amazon and Apple and Netflix? That's the benefit, with a leaderboard of internal and external usage statistics. In other words, we're going to gamify the product, right? And so the feature here is, you can think of this as a user story, right? The hypothesis is like a user story, but the definition of done here is not we shipped gamification, right? The definition of done is we have increased the number of classes taken by each customer by 300%. And if gamification doesn't do that, it was the wrong feature to work on. And we need to kill it as quickly as possible so that we can move on to features that actually do increase the number of classes that people actually take. These hypotheses start to make up the foundation of our backlog. They start to become our quarterly activities, right? And we have a list of these, and we begin to test and validate and invalidate and ship and build and ship and measure those things, ultimately based on the work that we'll be doing in each quarter, right? Now, in order to determine what we're going to build, what we're going to kill, right, we have to determine the risks in each of these ideas. In each of these hypotheses, there is risk. And we have to design experiments to test them. Because again, if that hypothesis does not change customer behavior, then that hypothesis was wrong. And we need to either throw it away to kill it or to pivot off of it and figure out a different way to execute so that it does elicit the behavior that we're looking for, right? These are our MVPs. These are our experiments, right? And we arrive at these experiments by looking at each hypothesis and asking ourselves, what's the most important thing that we need to learn about that hypothesis right now? And then we ask, what's the least amount of work that we need to do to learn that thing? And the answer to that second question is your experiment, right? And again, what's the easiest way for you to learn something? Because the faster you can learn, the less you invest in the idea. The less you invest in the idea, if you find out that you're wrong about the idea, the easier it is to pivot off of the idea, the easier it is to be agile, because you've invested so little in it, it hurts less to let it go, right? If you spend a week on something and you find out that it didn't work, well, we lost a week. If you spend 6 months on something only to find out it didn't work, that's going to hurt a lot more, right? So one of the things that we need to do is to build that learning into our process that allows us to then decide whether or not to kill, pivot, or persevere with these hypotheses. And again, it's these quarterly check-ins that then allow us to decide what we're doing further. So you sort of have agility at the sprintly level with the continuous learning, the experimentation, and the validation or the invalidation of these hypotheses. And then at the quarterly level, we give ourselves time to reflect, to decide, and to plan further and really think through these bigger questions, right? How are we trending towards the key results, right? What are we learning, right? How did our assumptions fare in the last 3 months? Are they still relevant? Are the hypotheses that we have in the backlog still good or not? What are we going to keep funding? Because we've got evidence to prove that we should keep working on this. What are we going to pivot on? What are we going to kill? And what new ideas have emerged in the last 3 months through the use of the system, through brainstorming, through customer feedback, right? Whatever it is, what are we going to add into that system? Now, one of the tough things about making this work, and there's a couple of things to share as I start to think of some of the challenges, is that in order for outcome-based product planning to work, it explicitly demands that your teams do product discovery. Product discovery is learning work, it's research, it's design, it's experimentation, it's MVPs, it's talking to customers, it's building prototypes, it's doing landing page tests and Wizards of Oz and all of those types of things, right? And this is tough. It's tough for at least 2 reasons in my experience, because I've been teaching product discovery for over 10 years. It's tough because many organizations still don't know how to do this. That's number one. And so if you set a key result as a goal for a team, they don't know, you didn't tell them exactly what to build. They're going to come up with these hypotheses. In order to test and validate them, they need to run experiments, and they don't know how to do that. So they need to be trained in how to do that. The second thing is that a lot of organizations that do know how to do product discovery don't let it happen, or don't let it happen in the quantities that it needs to happen, because it's seen as a distraction away from delivery work. Right? Yeah, we can design and build that stuff, but really we just need to write code. And as I mentioned before, we can deliver code as fast as we want today, right? The delivery of code is a non-event, right? And therefore it's not the measure of success. The measure of success is, did we build something of value for the customer? And discovery helps us to figure out whether or not we're actually building something of value for the customer. Now, the last thing I want to cover—
5 minutes left, please.
Awesome. I got 5 minutes worth of content left. It's perfect. The last thing I want to cover is challenges, right? So what are the challenges? This is it may sound simple. I don't know if it sounds simple to me, right? I don't know if it sounds simple to you, but you're going to face some challenges from your colleagues and your stakeholders to implementing this way of working. Number one, bosses, right? Bosses like to tell people what to do, right? When we look at outcome-based product planning, we are explicitly asking leaders, stakeholders, clients, whatever it is, not to tell people what to build, but instead to tell them what the outcome goals should be, what the key results should be. And so they're going to push back. There will be anxiety, right? Because this is what I'm supposed to do. I was told that my job is to tell people what to build and to manage them to deliver that thing. But now that thing isn't there anymore, or at least not explicitly. How do I know? What do I do? Like, what is my job, right? I tell people what to do. One of the things that really helps is to level set these diagrams, these product plans for each audience, right? If you think about this as a design exercise, right? You've got sort of your leaders, stakeholders, whatever, your clients, we're going to need to see things at this level. This is kind of a high level view, but at the team level, they might not need to see all of that. We might want to just kind of break this down a bit lower. And so you're going to have to get more explicit and specific by breaking down the hypotheses into actionable tasks that include both product discovery and delivery, right? The coding work, the user stories are going to go in here. It's just that the acceptance criteria for each of these tasks and each of these stories is not just works as designed, done as spec'd out, but ultimately it delivered learning or value or both, or we have to roll it back. And it's interesting because the leaders, especially middle managers, are going to ask you, well, if I don't tell people what to do, well, then what's my job ultimately? And these are your jobs. Your job as a leader in an outcome-based, in an agile organization, a resilient organization, is to define and clarify the strategy, is to set guardrails and scope. We're working on a mobile solution, folks, so let's just focus on that, right? Is to help make key decisions. Someone has to own the decisions, right? Collaboration is not democracy. To get obstacles out of the way and to really facilitate the team's success. And this really helps you think through what to do. Now, the other thing that gets in the way of leaders is that if I don't know exactly what the team is building and when they're going to be done, what if someone asks me what the team is doing and I don't know the answer? In this case, the responsibility here is on the team, okay? The team has to step up. If you work on a team that wants to work towards outcomes, this is where you step up. This is your opportunity to make your boss successful so they get off your back and let you work, right? And that means that you're being radically transparent about what you're working on. You're over communicating about what you're learning. You're supporting your decisions with data, reinforcing the key results as the goal, not the feature, and you're checking in very, very quickly. So there's a two-way conversation here that makes this more successful. Sales teams are going to say, well, listen, how can I sell it if you don't tell me what you're building? Again, we're going to sell the benefit, not the feature. We're going to speak in outcomes. When we ship the next version of the product, your team's efficiency is going to go up by 50%. Data integrity is going to go up 100%, right? The financial impact of that for you is X, Y, and Z dollars, right? That's how we're going to sell this. Now, look, this is the source of agility, right? This ensures that we're paying attention to how well our work is meeting the needs of our customers, right? If we're not changing their behavior in a positive way, we have objective measures for that, and we can adjust our work, we can pivot, we can be agile to do that. And the short cycles in Agile allow us to minimize the investments in features that don't actually work. This outcome-based product planning is objective, and it's evidence-based decision-making, right, as opposed to the highest paid person's opinion. And then most importantly, outcome-based product planning helps us stop lying to ourselves and our bosses, because we can be more realistic about what we're delivering, when we're delivering, and the ultimate benefits it's going to have for the customer and for the business. And so with that, thank you very, very much for listening. I'll take as many questions as I can in the time that we have. If I don't get to your question today, please, that's my email address right there on the screen. It's jeff@gothelf.co. Please feel free to just drop me a line and say hello and ask any questions that you may have. Thanks so much.
Jeff, thank you so much for that really, really interesting session. We do have a few questions already lined up for you, and I'll just remind everybody ahead of time that if we don't have time to answer all your questions, or if you want to have a little bit of more personal time with Jeff, we have the Zoom room open where you'll be able to speak with each of the speakers briefly after their session ends, okay? And we'll resend that in the chat shortly. So let's get right to the questions we have over here. So there's a question here. What do you do if you are not Netflix or Apple, and if you have customers that are requiring specific features, specific commitments? What do you recommend?
Look, most companies aren't Amazon, Netflix, or Apple. We use those examples as inspiration, really, more than anything, to get a sense of what's possible, and sort of what, obviously, shipping code once a second is the extreme end of things. If you've got specific feature commitments to your customer, ask yourself why. Right? Why are we committing to fixed features and fixed dates? Right? Ultimately, those features are delivering some kind of a capability to achieve some kind of an outcome. Now, look, I understand that there are industries and situations where this is going to be difficult, right? There's a level of predictability, for example, in medical systems that you're going to need, right? In security systems that you're going to need. So maybe this doesn't work, at least not at the pace that I described in every single industry. But ultimately, I think this is about having different conversations with your customers, right? It forces a tough conversation. I'll tell you a story. Honestly, it's the best way I know how to answer this question. I used to work at a web analytics company about 15 years ago. Wow, it's been a while. 15 years ago in Portland, Oregon. And we had two branches of our code base. We had the everybody branch of the code base and the Microsoft branch of the code base, because they were our customer, right? And the organization made an explicit decision to sort of solve outcomes for everybody else and give Microsoft the features that they asked for, because they were a big client. It was a nightmare. We had to maintain two code bases, and ultimately it was a capitulation to a big client. Now, obviously that worked well for the organization, but I think the conversation that we really should have been having with Microsoft at the time is, what is the product not allowing you to do right now? And what would you like to be able to do, and why, right? The why is the most important part. Right? People will say, well, I need calendar integration. And you're like, okay, why? Well, because I keep missing my meetings every morning because I oversleep. Okay, great. So the goal is to make sure you don't miss your meetings, right? Let us, look, we're the product design experts, the product development experts. Let us figure out how to best make sure that you don't miss your meetings in the morning. That might be calendar integration, right? But let's figure out the best way to do that, because look, there's an infinite number of combinations for you to solve any customer problem, an infinite combination of code, copy, design, value proposition, business model, pricing model, etc. And so just because somebody thinks one way is the best way to do it doesn't necessarily guarantee it. And in most cases, they're wrong.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. I do think that most of us, are working at organizations where that's probably the case. So one more short question, hopefully. So usually the outcome that we might be realized much after the release of a feature. Okay, so the goal might be for that same time, might not be for that same time period. So how would you measure the success of like, say you're doing it quarterly, right? How would you measure the success of that quarter when you haven't had that feedback yet in cases where it's longer?
Yeah, so this is where discovery comes in, right? So I totally get that it might take you until the end of the quarter to ship something. In advance of that, you should be doing discovery work, experimentation, customer conversations, proofs of concept, landing page tests, whatever. There's a million versions of these things. To start to get even qualitative feedback that indicates that this is something that you should continue to invest in and ship, right? There will be inevitably the only way that you'll be able to answer sort of like, does this work at scale, is to ship that product. But that doesn't have to be the first time you find out if this works. There are lots and lots of little experiments and conversations you can have in advance of that give you the word we use a lot is a smell, right? Does it smell like it's going to be successful, or does it smell like we should go in this other direction, right? Where does the scent take us? Now, again, it's qualitative and it might give you a false positive, but at the very least, it's some kind of evidence rather than just simple gut instinct.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that's all the time we have but there were a few more questions in the Q&A. And so I'm sure that some folks will be interested in meeting up with you in the Zoom room. So thank you so much, Jeff. It was really, really interesting. And I think we're all going to take home a lot of points to move on. So take care for now.